And when you hear the word worship, what comes to your mind? Really, the first thing that comes to your mind. Let's go. All right, you got your answer? I'm Pastor Fred. This is the follow through. When you hear the word worship, you probably think about a church or some kind of church building. You might think of some kind of service, a worship service. And even in a lot of churches, the worship is during a specific time, right? So there's the music where they sing songs, and then there is the teaching time or the sermon time, and then maybe there's a little bit of worship more. And there's a whole genre of music, praise and worship music. Now, again, I'm down with that. That's great. But here's the thing. We're going to talk about all week. God calls us to a life of worship, to worship Him with all that we are and all that we have, not just in church, not just in a building at a certain time of the week, but to worship Him all the time, with our very lives. Because to worship something, really, it's that thing that you praise it, you talk about it, you give your money to it, your time to it, your effort to it. It's just your everything, and that's what worship is. When we worship someone, right? Sometimes you'll say, "Oh, he worships the ground that she walks on," and that means that he is constantly doing things for his girl, and he's buying her stuff, and he would just speaks a certain way to her and about her, and all of that. It's to adore her and to let the world know how awesome she is. And he would never do anything that would hurt her. See, that's worship. That's the heart of worship. It's saying to God, you are everything, and look at all that you do. And God's He's wired us to do that. You worship something. You might worship someone. But what is that? And today, and we're going to talk about that all week. And today we're going to talk about the where, like where can you worship, and what kind of worship does God want from us? So we go to John chapter 4. This is Jesus talking to the woman at the well there in Samaria. She's a Samaritan woman, which means that the Samaritans and the Jews kind of had a bit of a falling out. The Jews often looked down on the Samaritans, and they said, the Jewish people would say, like, hey, where we worship is legit. Like, we have Jerusalem, that's our worship center, and that is the only proper place, and the worship there is the only kind of proper thing. Now, where you Samaritans who were sort of seen as kind of mixed faith, they had other faith, they had kind of compromised on faith in a lot of ways, and so those worship places they had were not as seen as legit. Okay, that's kind of oversimplifying it probably, but that's kind of what you had. And so Jesus is having this conversation, and this woman is kind of like pushing back. And Jesus is leaning in and trying to reach out to her. And they have this conversation. And Jesus says this about worship and where you should worship. I'm in John 4. Let's start in verse 21. Because she says, and I'll give you verse 20 just to see. She says, our fathers, again, drawing a line, worshipped on this mountain, but you say that in Jerusalem is the place where we ought to worship, right? That's kind of what I was talking about. So Jesus says to her, woman, believe me, the hour is coming when neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem will you worship the Father. You worship what you do not know. We worship what we know, for salvation is from the Jews. But the hour's coming, and is now here, when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth, for the Father is seeking such people to worship Him. God is spirit, and those who worship Him must worship in spirit and truth. So it's not about a location or a time, scheduled thing. Now I pray that we worship with all our heart, soul, everything we've got when we're in those spaces, in those places, in those moments, at those times that are set, right? It's on our website, 8:30 and 11, right? And you come and you worship. Yeah. But hopefully you're worshiping before you show up and after you leave. When you get up the next day and the next day and the next day and you're worshiping God, you're saying, all right, Lord, let's worship. I want to give everything to you, my life as an offering to you, because I'm so grateful that you died for me. I'm so grateful that Jesus gave his life and rose for me. And Jesus is saying that when he says the hour has now come, he's saying like he is the fulfillment of all of that. The center of our worship, the object of our worship is him. It's his truth. It's his love. It was never relegated to be just in a place, but in spirit, as he says, and in truth. And that's all of the time. Listen, you could be in a church building and not really worship him. Back then, you could have been in Jerusalem and had your heart far from him. Going through all the motions, doing all the things, standing when you're supposed to, sitting, kneeling, doing all the things, but really your heart not in it at all. Your soul far from it. So in your worship time today, again, this is perfect because we're in worship mode. Because we're God's children. He loves us and he died for us. We have so many reasons. We've been talking about it day after day over the last couple of weeks. So many reasons to love him. So many reasons to worship him. He's given us eternal life. He's given us forgiveness. He is with us. He's given us family. He's given us this faith and he's there with us. So we worship him. So let's do what this text says and let's worship him in spirit and truth. Just having conversations with God, just getting into his word, talking about it with each other, singing songs or just listening to songs and letting that fill your heart and worship him for who he is. All right, awesome. Have a great rest of your day. Hit that subscribe button and share this with somebody and we'll be back at you tomorrow with another follow through.